The other day I picked up several rusty rasps and files from a thrift store. I got this file for $1. I'm going to attempt to make a file knife. I've never made one before. I've never made a knife before. Wish me luck. The first thing I had to do was make a pattern. I started by sketching out 3 different knife designs. And then I picked my favorite one and I cut it out. Before we transfer the pattern to the file, we have to clean it up a little bit. I'm just using a wire wheel and a grinder. With the file halfway clean, we can transfer the pattern. I'm just going to use a black Sharpie to trace the pattern onto the file. Now it's time to cut it out. There's 2 main ways to make a knife. The first is by forging. It's where you heat up a big hunk of metal and then beat and pound it into shape. The other way is by stock removal. That's what I'm doing. I'm just using my grinder with a cutoff disc to cut out the shape. Another method, known as the shank method, is much slower. One good thing about making a knife from a file is that the file is already hardened steel, so you don't have to have a forge to harden it. But you do have to keep it cool, because if you heat it up too much, it'll lose its hardness. That's why I keep spraying it with water in between. You'll know if you've heated it up too much because it'll start to change colors like a rainbow. I've switched from the cutoff wheel to a flap disc sander in my grinder. I'm using this to get the final contours where I want them. And even while sanding, I'm still mindful to cool it down every few seconds with water. I can't reiterate enough that you have to keep this blade cool. I've taken it inside and I'm using my stationary sander to finish smoothing the contours. And then using my mini belt sander, I'm easing all the edges of the handle so that they're not so sharp in your hand. And here we have our roughed out knife. I'm using a black Sharpie to color the edge of the blade. I'm doing this so that I can mark it and it'll show up. Using my digital calipers, I first figure out the overall width of the blade, and then I set the calipers to half of that width. And then I lock the calipers so they don't move. Now, dragging one finger down one edge of the blade, the other finger makes a scratch perfectly centered in the blade. This is called the grind line. If you grind your bevels from either side and meet them on that line, then your knife is perfectly symmetrical. I'm using my flap disc sander again to grind these bevels. And here's what it looks like after the grinding. I mentioned before that a file is hardened already. The problem is it's so hard it's brittle. We need to bring that hardness down a little bit. We do this by tempering it in the oven. It goes in the oven at 400 degrees for an hour. We take it out after an hour, let it cool, put it back in for another cycle of an hour at 400, and when we're done, it's tempered. It turns a golden straw color. This is how you know that it got to the correct temper. From what I understand, the gold is actually a scale that forms from the heating process. We need to take that off in the next step. I fashioned a jig that'll hold the knife as we work on it. It takes advantage of the wooden knob and the insert in the workbench that we built for our Craig jig. Sanding the knife will remove the scale and take out the scratches. We're going to start at 120 and work our way up through 1000 grit. This part of the process is tedious and it takes a while, but if you do it right, it really makes a big difference in the finish of your knife. After the sanding's done, I use my Lansky knife sharpener to put an edge on the knife. Here we have the finished product. I love how it still has the file name on it and all the serrations. There's no doubt of what it used to be in its previous life. Well, I gotta say, I am super pleased at how this turned out. This is the first knife I've ever made, so, you know, it's got some flaws, but I will take it. It's a cool knife. I've always wanted to make a file knife. It took me most of a Saturday to grind it and shape it to what it is, mainly because I was trying to keep from heating it up and losing that hardness. So had to grind a little, spritz a little, grind a little, soak it a little, you know, trying to keep it cool. If I had the right tools, I probably could have done it a whole lot quicker. I know I could have, because I know knife makers and they turn them out a lot quicker than that. But for using woodworking tools that I have and for never have done it before, I couldn't have asked for a better outcome. So I appreciate you watching. If you haven't yet, hit this button right here and subscribe. That'd help me out a whole lot. Also, check these videos out below me. And stay tuned, because you may see me make a sheath for this pretty soon. Thanks for watching.